Okay, so we've talked about multi-factor authentication. Let's talk about quickly how that relates to identification, authorization, authentication, and accounting. So the identification part is easy because we're trying to authenticate users with an additional factor. The authorization really comes into permissions that are assigned after successful authentication that can be realized by a user that's signed in with MFA. But what about the accounting part? The accounting really is the same thing as auditing. We want to be able to account for or audit the activity that that user executed when they were signed in. So what we're going to do then in this case is we're going to take a look at how to enable MFA, multi-factor authentication, for a Microsoft Azure user account. Okay, so here in the Microsoft Azure portal, the first thing we have to do is get to where the user accounts are. So I'm going to open up my left-hand navigator and I'm going to scroll down to Azure Active Directory. This is essentially a watered-down version of Active Directory that's available in the Azure cloud. If I click Users in the left-hand navigator, I will get a list of user accounts that were created in Azure AD. For instance, I have a user named User1. Now, if I click the multi-factor authentication button at the top, that opens up a new browser window. And what it's going to do is show me all of my users and the state of MFA for each and every one of them. Is it enabled or is it not? And currently what we have is that for user 1, the state of MFA is currently disabled. So naturally what we're going to do here is we're going to turn on that check mark. We're going to click Enable on the far right, and we're going to click the Enable Multi-Factor Auth button. And it says it was successful. So when I close out, now it's showing that user 1 has MFA enabled. But understand that there's a distinction between enabled and enforced. Enabled means what we think it is. It's turned on, but the user has never signed in and is not actively using MFA yet. After they do that, it'll switch from enabled to enforced. So what we need to do then is sign in as user 1 to see what their experience will be like the first time they sign in once MFA is enabled. So I'm going to go back to Azure AD and I'm going to open up the properties of user 1 because I need to take note of the email address. I'm going to sign in with that user's email address, and I already know what that user account password is, so I'm going to be signing in using that. Now you might wonder, signing into what? Well, let's say that a user is going to sign into myapps.microsoft.com, which will show them any apps that they're authorized to use, for example, through their Azure AD account. So what we're going to do is sign in with that account. Okay, so I've specified that user sign-in name. I'll click Next, and I'm going to pop in the password, and I'm going to click Sign In. So what happens then is it triggers this message for the user that says, more information is required. Your organization needs more info to keep your account secure. Okay, I don't have a choice. I guess I'm clicking Next. When I click Next, it'll then prompt me for some details about alternate ways to authenticate, such as using the Microsoft Authenticator app, which is what pops up initially. I also can choose I want to set up a different method down below. And when I do that, from the drop-down list, I can choose to get a notification sent to my phone. So if you don't want to install the Microsoft Authenticator app as your other factor for signing in, you can have a message sent to your phone. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to specify my country and phone number, and I'm going to tell it to send me an SMS text message to my phone. Okay, so I checked my phone. I had a text message from Microsoft with a 6-digit code, and I've entered it in here. I'll click Next. And this way, I'm using multi-factor authentication already. It says it's SMS verified. Now, multi-factor because I had to know a username and a password, so that's something you know, but I had to have my phone in my possession to receive that code, something you have, hence multi-factor. So at this point, I can continue signing in, click Next, and Done, and I am now signed in. So in the future, from this point forward, the user is simply going to be prompted to enter the 6-digit code in addition to the username and the password. So we've successfully enabled MFA in Microsoft Azure.